Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to another episode of SportsZone. Super Bowl weekend has came and gone, and here to recap the Super Bowl with me is going to be Julian Lofgreen and Mason Brenham. Guys, I'm going to get this question out there. Was this the result you expected? The Chiefs going back-to-back, taking the game into overtime, one of two Super Bowls in history to go into overtime. Julian?
I'm going to be honest, no. I thought the way the game was going to start was we were going to have both offenses come out just swinging, lots of points, and then the defenses were really going to adjust. I felt that we got the opposite, where the defenses came out, had a great game plan, shut down both the offenses in the first half of the game. That really made it difficult on offenses, but then towards the second quarter and the second half, that's really when you got to see the adjustments from both teams as they started making those.
And then, Mason, what were your thoughts on the game?
I mean, I kind of saw this going the way it did. I mean, it was one of those games where the Chiefs would score, the 49ers would answer, the 49ers would score, the Chiefs would answer. And, I mean, this was one of those typical games where it's the last team to have the ball wins the game. And, I mean, we saw that at the end of the fourth quarter with the Chiefs tying the game and then ultimately going into overtime, getting the game-winning touchdown. I mean, like he said, this was a very defensive-centric game at first with the offenses starting to take over. But honestly, I think this was one of the more entertaining Super Bowls we've had the last few years.
Yeah, I would actually agree with that. I know a lot of people didn't think this game would be as good as that ended up being. I mean, a thriller overtime game. Definitely wasn't what I was expecting. But I want to go ahead and look at the 49ers first before we get into talking about the Chiefs, because obviously they'll get their flowers in just a minute. What do you think went wrong for the 49ers, Mason?
Well, I mean, we all went into this game thinking it was going to be an offensive shootout, but especially with the 49ers having Ayuk, Samuel, Kittle, McCaffrey, Purdy, possibly this being a proving ground game. But for me, the biggest thing that lost them the game was the defense. I mean, first half was a stereotypical defense for the 49ers. They only gave up 144 yards, 3 points that first half. But then the second half in overtime, they gave up almost double that at 280 yards and 22 points. And I mean, yes, you could say there were adjustments made by the Chiefs and maybe some game plan didn't go as well as the 49ers thought. But this was a very offensive game that should have been a very defensive game. So I think going into it, there was a lot of expectations on the 49ers defense making plays, and they just weren't able to do that.
Yeah, just to kind of bounce off your point there, I thought this was definitely going to be a defensive game by the 49ers, and it was up until that second half, and then they kind of fell apart. I remember, watching at my friend's house, and it was on that last drive before overtime. Nick Bosa, he's caught between going to chase Mahomes or going up and picking up Kelsey. Well, he relieves off of Kelsey, and obviously they get the first down. And, I was like, you can't go off of Kelsey. Yeah. I don't care what Mahomes looks like he's about to do. You have teammates. You got to stay grounded on Kelsey. Julian, what were your thoughts?
I kind of feel that the main reason the 49ers lost is they got away from what they do best. I feel the first half they came out and there was an urgency to run the ball with Christian McCaffrey. He's been their best player all year, and they clearly, when the game started, that's what they wanted to do. Again, he fumbled on that first drive. It was a big kill. I feel if they could have got 7 on that first drive, it really would have set a tone for the overall aspect of the game. And then just a lot of selfish errors just on the team. Trent Williams, I know on their second drive, 2 penalties that put him back, and they had to punt the ball away. And then just in the second half, they just got away from what they wanted to do. They didn't really run the ball in the second half, and that's why they started out with 3 and outs in the second half, and that's kind of just, it ended up costing them at the end of the game.
Yeah, Julian, I want to kind of ask you a question based off your point. You said, they had the sense of urgency running it with McCaffrey. What did you think about Shanahan using Jennings, more than we've seen him use Jennings this entire season?
I think it was big for them, for one, because there's 2 good corners on the other side the Chiefs had. Trent McDuffie and L'Jarius Sneed, both 2 really good corners. McDuffie's an all-pro guy, so I feel like they were kind of able to take out Brandon Ayuk and Deebo Samuel, and then that allowed room for Jennings to make plays. He's that third guy, and he's matched up on the third guy on the Chiefs who, like I said, he's not an all-pro guy. So this allowed Jennings to make plays, and I feel he really stepped up for the 49ers.
Mason, what are your thoughts on the use of Juwan Jennings
Well, I think kind of like what he said. When you have 2 high-caliber corners, they're going to be locked down. And, I mean, that's exactly what the Chiefs did. I mean, they held Ayuk to 3 catches for 49 yards, Samuel to 3 catches for 33 yards, and George Kittle for 2 catches for only 4 yards. And, I mean, that's only about 90 yards between those 3 guys. And normally you see those guys each putting up 90. And I mean, if you're able to do that, then yeah, you're going to have to find somebody that can make those plays, that can get the ball down the field. And Jennings was that guy. I mean, he even threw a touchdown, which I didn't see that coming. But I think, yes, it was great to have Jennings be able to step up and make those plays. But it would have been a very helpful thing for the 49ers to have their weapons be able to perform.
Right, and now we're going to look at the other side, the Kansas City Chiefs. You know, what went right for them in the game? What would y'all say the turning point of the game was for them? Because to me, in the first half, it seemed like Kelsey and Mahomes just weren't connecting. Obviously, Kelsey frustrated with Andy Reid. So what was that turning point, Julian?
I think for me, it's got to be the punt that they muffed, the 49ers punt muffed. Bounced off the guy's foot. Not a whole lot really the returner could have done about that. He tried to get on the ball. They weren't able to get it. Chiefs get the ball. They score right away, get the lead, makes it 13-10. And just kind of from there, the Chiefs were just like, oh, we kind of have it. I felt in like the first half, they were down the entire time, really unable to move the ball. And like you kind of talked about, visible frustration from Travis Kelce. On the Pacheco fumble, he was clearly mad that Andy Reid took him out of the game, saying, leave me in the game. And you kind of see the visible frustration. So I think halftime was good for them. They were able to kind of come back, regroup. And then you kind of see they came out with a different energy in the second half, which kind of just took over for the rest of the game.
And Mason, what would you say was the turning point?
I would say that, yeah, Kelsey having that talk with Coach Reid saying, hey, I want to be in this game. Let me go out there and make the plays that I know I can make. But also, the defense was a big part of this. I mean, they did hold their top three weapons to under 90 yards, but also they had a sack, 2 key turnovers, 4 tackles for loss. But the pressure on Purdy, that's what I think won them the game. I mean, on the last 49ers drive, Purdy had a throw in the end zone, but wasn't able to make the play because Chris Jones was right there. So he had to get rid of the ball. And if you give Purdy an extra half a second to a second, we're talking about a 49ers win perhaps. And I mean, instead of having to go down and kick the field goal, and also with the kicking game, that blocked PAT. Looking back in the moment, you may think, oh, you know, it's only not that big a deal. But at the end of the game, I mean, you get 1 point, you force the Chiefs to go for that touchdown instead of kicking 3. And who knows, maybe you make a stop with Mahomes. But I just think there's a lot of things that could have gone a different way that if they did, the 49ers could have won. But I just think they kind of got the bad luck of the draw, as they say in Vegas.
Right. I mean, that last play literally determined the whole outcome of the game. I want to talk about the Chiefs and like their whole team as an organization. They went back-to-back in this Super Bowl. They could have a chance to, you know, have a three-peat next season. Would y'all say that the Chiefs are a dynasty now at this point, Julian?
I would say, yeah. I think when you got a guy up to the equivalent of Patrick Mahomes, I mean, I know he's already getting the Tom Brady comparisons, and I don't know if he's quite at that level, but when you just have a guy who's able to just manage the game like that, and truly, I felt in the entire Super Bowl, there was never a point where he didn't feel like he was in control of the Super Bowl. When you just have a guy like that, it just makes the entire team around you better. And if you really look, he doesn't really have that many superstar players around him, but when you're that good, you're able to elevate guys to play as good as they possibly can be. And then, I mean, if you look, they traded away Tyreek Hill, a guy who many people would argue was a top 3, even maybe the best wide receiver in the league 2 years ago, and they've made the Super Bowl back-to-back years and won it. I mean, that just speaks to the kind of talent Patrick Mahomes has.
And Mason, what would you say about the Chiefs?
Well, I
being
think
a
one of the major things that I would say is if you look at Mahomes, he's already won 3 Super Bowls, and he's not even 30 years old. I mean, look at Brady and Belichick. They were together for 20 years, and they won 5, 6 titles. And if you already have Mahomes at this young of an age, already with 3 rings, I could definitely see them becoming a dynasty if they aren't already now. Now, as far as the Brady talks, maybe in a couple of years, after maybe 1 or 2 more titles, I would say, but I could definitely see this Chiefs team becoming a dynasty.
Mason, I am so glad that you brought up Bill Belichick, because now the questions that I've been seeing around X and around Instagram, who's the better coach, Andy Reid or Bill Belichick?
I mean, if you look at Chiefs, Andy Reid and Belichick, I think it's close. But you also got to remember the dark days of Philly. I mean, it was a rough time for Andy Reid back when he was coach of the Philadelphia Eagles. But I think I wouldn't say that Coach Reid is quite near Belichick, but he's not very far off. Just like how Mahomes isn't at Brady level yet, but he's very close. And I think You give them a couple more years, couple more Super Bowls, I think there will be some serious conversations.
Yeah, Mason, I would definitely have to agree with you. We have to give Andy Reid a couple more years. And big things aren't just happening in football. When we come back, we'll talk about some of the biggest trades in the NBA. Stay tuned.
And now we return to Fabric of Passion.
Oh, Hector, it will be so hard for us to part, but we must.
But, my love, what did I do? I thought we were meant to be together forever.
I am so disheartened to say that you're just not in style anymore. But you will be, to someone else, in a better place.
You're gonna shred me?
No.
I'm donating you to one of the many clothing donation boxes available on campus. There is one in the Union by the Syndicate and one on Union Circle Drive.
Oh, well, why didn't you just say so? I'm gonna be someone's new shirt.
I thought you'd be more distressed.
Oh, absolutely not. It was cramped in your closet anyways.
Maybe you would like to be shredded after all.
Can I see your voter registration, please? All right, you're good. No registration, no entry. All right. Let me see your voter registration card, please.
I'm not registered to vote.
No registration, no entry.
Dude, my friends are already in there.
No registration, no entry.
What the?
Join the club. Register to vote today.
Good evening and welcome back to SportsZone. The NBA trade deadline was last week. We're going to take a look at it here. Joining me to talk about those trades is going to be Adam O'Day and Gabe Ife. Gabe, I'm going to start with you. What team would you say made the biggest trade in the NBA?
I would have to give you two teams, I would say. I would say the Knicks and the Dallas Mavericks. You know, the Knicks with OG Anunoby, Bojan Bogdanovic, and Alec Burks. I think those three were it bolsters really a great young Knicks team already. And now they can compete, I would say, in the East against all the top teams there. You know, they really have some dogs on the squad.
Oh, yeah. And former Mavs, Jalen Brunson.
Yes, like Jalen Brunson. They've solidified themselves, you know, as one of the top teams in the East and maybe one of the best teams in the NBA. And then you can see them competing for an Eastern Conference Finals. And then, you know, with the Mavs, with Daniel Gafford and P.J. Washington, I would say.
Adam, what about you? What were your thoughts on the team that made the biggest trade?
I agree. The Knicks are my team to look out for with all these trades, specifically Bojan Bogdanovic. You know, he's a very talented scorer, and, you know, I really like him to just ball out alongside Brunson. Yeah,
I mean, they've had a lot of threats on their team. Julius Randle, obviously Jalen Brunson, like we mentioned. And then adding Bogdanovic, that's going to be another huge threat. I mean, he's averaging 20.2 points per game. That was definitely the one I went with as well. But in the NBA, obviously with trades, you have winners and you have losers. So who would y'all say made the worst trade in the NBA? Or no trade at all?
I would have to go with the trade with Dinwiddie to the Raptors, sending Dennis Schroeder back and Thaddeus Young to the Nets. Now, you know, Dinwiddie's with the Lakers now, and Young got waived. I think Schroeder, I might be wrong. I think Schroeder's the only one still with the teams. But that trade just didn't make much sense to me to start off with. I guess if they went in intending for it to waive Dinwiddie, then it makes a little bit more sense. But they're, I believe, 11th and 12th in the East. They're both two mediocre teams. The two guards aren't elite level. I believe they aren't like enough to change either team's dynamic. I guess the Raptors, I think, are trying to make a little bit of a push. But then they waived Dinwiddie. So I just didn't understand that trade. That was kind of the worst trade for me.
Did you think that one was like the worst in the league that was made?
I would say so. I think that's just the worst. It doesn't really make sense from either side. So for that, I really do think it's the worst trade.
And then Adam, what was the NBA trade loser in your opinion?
I'd have to go with that same trade. I mean, maybe Dinwiddie just didn't like Brooklyn. He's shooting 39% this year, but still, like, immediately cutting him, that's just doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, and then we're going to take a look at the Mavericks. They made 2 pretty big trades, as y'all were mentioning. We're going to take a look at P.J. Washington first. Obviously, this was a pretty good trade. I mean, we gave up Grant Williams and Seth Curry, but I felt like those were 2 guys that we can let go. So, Gabe, we'll just start with you. What were your thoughts on the P.J. Washington trade?
I would say it was a pretty good trade. I think it doesn't jump off the radar too much because of the first-round pick given up. I think that first-round pick, really impacts it in a certain sense because if they get like a great prospect from that, then it can look a little worse. But Graham Williams, someone who's they were trying to get rid of,
Right.
just terrible defense. And so overall, I do think it was a pretty good trade.
I mean, I know, like, in terms of Grant Williams, I even thought that we'd expect him to average, 15 points per game here, be the defensive leader, and he just really didn't bring that to the Mavs organization, and, he didn't do his job, so obviously at the trade deadline, I think it was time for him to go. Adam? Go ahead,
sorry
Dave.
to jump
Sorry.
in. I was going to say there was also a lot of team culture dynamic issues,
Right.
I believe. I think he was causing a lot of problems in the locker room. And so even though, you've given up a first rounder as well, I think that also played a part in getting rid of him.
Adam, your thoughts on the P.J. Washington trade?
I think it was good, not great. I'm really excited for P.J. Washington's upside, but I agree. I think we gave up a little too much with that first-round pick. So, I mean, it's not ideal, but I'll gladly take a P.J. Washington over Grant Williams.
Right, and before getting into the next big Dallas Maverick trade, what would y'all grade the Mavericks on their trade for P.J. Washington?
I'd grade that trade a B+.
Okay. What about you, Gabe?
I gave it like an A-. I would say they accomplished their goal. And first-round picks are so finicky, I would say.
Yeah.
It feels like there's really about 10 prospects every year that really
Right.
make a big impact their first 5 years or so, like in the NBA. So for that, I would say it's range A-, I believe.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with Adam here. I said I thought that was a B+. I think it solved some of their issues, but not all of it, especially since we don't know what P.J. Washington's going to do yet. He did have a very good game, the past game, however. Now getting into the next trade the Mavs made with the Washington Wizards, they got Daniel Gafford. I thought that was a good trade. I mean, you bring a big man in. The Mavericks have struggled in that big man position. Gabe, what was your thought on the trade?
I love it. You're adding a good presence on both sides of the ball. He can defend, and he's good on the offensive side. He averages 15 points a game and 8 rebounds per game. And you're also getting around, 2 blocks a game. So he can defend in the paint. I really think it's a great trade. It could really propel them to the play-in, and maybe, even if he could take off a little bit even more, it could maybe get them to that 7 or 6 seed as well.
Right. Adam, your thoughts?
I love this trade. I'm hesitant to give it an A+, so I'll give it an A, but over Gafford's last 3 games with the Wizards, he averaged 13 points, 11 rebounds, and 2 blocks a game. And if you just look at his Mavs debut, 19 points on a very efficient shooting day. So I absolutely love this trade for the Mavs.
Right. How important would you say it was to bring in Daniel Gafford on a team, that had Dwight Powell or Derek Lively, and, those were the 2 centers they had. Obviously, I think Derek Lively does a good job, but I think he just needs a little bit more time and help, and I think Daniel Gafford will help with that.
Right. And Lively's also been hurt, so adding that additional depth will be huge for the Mavs to make a playoff run.
What about your thoughts, Gabe?
I think it's similar. I think it's really key that they get a third very good big man. It's a little similar to the UNT men's basketball situation with Sissoko and Allen. They need a third big man as well.
Right.
We'll get into that in another block down the road today. But having a third big man is key, especially with Lively, who's been hurt some. He's going to be really key to stepping in there, taking up some of those minutes, while being good on the offensive side of the ball. It's really good to have a multitude where you can sub one in, and just keep on rotating, keep them fresh.
Right, and for the Mavs, obviously we talked about some of their issues, with the big man, having some inconsistency in the guard positions. Would y'all say at this point, just over halfway through the season, these 2 trades will help them get a guaranteed playoff spot?
I would say so, yeah. Right now we're locked into the 8th seed, but only a game behind the 5 seed. So I believe that we'll be able to crawl at least into the 5 or 6 seed and avoid the play-in.
Okay.
Yeah, I see that too. It's really hard for me to see the Mavs just falling out of a spot completely. I don't think Luka will let that happen, to be quite honest with you. Now, could they stay in the play-in? I think it'll take time for Gaffer to start meshing with the rest of the team. Getting a big man, comfortable is going to take a few games, and that could result in a couple of shaky losses. But I really do think that they'll end up at least in the play-in, if not, like Adam said, getting into that 6 or maybe even 5.
And if these trades don't secure a playoff spot, do you think they'll secure a play-in tournament win?
Oh, 100%. I'm very high on the Mavs' ability to, win at least a few spot games in the playoffs.
Right.
But, if they're able to, make it into the play-in, then maybe they have a first-round exit, but at the very least, make it out of the play-in.
Gabe?
Yeah, I would say so too. I think the teams around them, I believe the Lakers are fighting for a play-in, and I believe some of the other teams. I just don't really think, I think most of the teams around them couldn't beat them in a one-game series. So I would think they'd make it at least past the first.
Especially, if the whole team's healthy, you got Luka, Kyrie, Gafford, I think will be a very good pick for the Mavs. But we'll just have to see how these trades pan out for the rest of the season. When we come back, we'll still be discussing basketball, but we'll look at it at the collegiate level. Stay tuned.
Good evening. My name is Amanda Hasbell, and I'm joining you here today in the Union parking garage. Today we're going to be going over how to drive safely in the parking garage. Let's go see. Oh my God! Oh my God! This girl just got hit by a car. Let's go see what happened. Ma'am, are you okay? Are you okay?
Did you see that lady hit me with a car?
Yeah, we did. I got it all on video.
Oh my God.
Let's go over here and talk about how we can prevent that.
Yeah, not the hospital.
Well, right now we're going to ask you a couple questions on how we can drive safely in the parking lot. What are ways that we can be aware of our surroundings?
Oh, we can look both ways.
Jenna, also, how about putting the distractions away?
Yes, just like our phones, turning our music down, and also not focusing on our passengers.
Where can you get information on how to get a parking pass?
Transportation.unt.edu.
If you park in a garage, make sure you pay on the app or look for further instructions on how you should pay.
And remember, no pass, no park. Let's all try to keep our Mean Green community safe.
Remember, we're all in this together.
Drive safe.
Has the weight of stress and anxiety ever felt too heavy to overcome? Wish there was a safe place to confide in? Wish granted. At UNT, we offer counseling and testing services to students located on the 3rd floor of Chestnut Hall. UNT, we're here for you.
Good evening and welcome back to SportsZone. I'm your host, Mackenzie Freeman, joined here by Ben Wolf and Adam C. as we discuss the UNT men's basketball team, and then we'll take a look at the women's here in a couple of minutes. Adam, I'm going to start with you. UNT goes into SMU, largest lead 11, ends up losing 71-68. What were your thoughts on the Mean Green performance?
It's a heartbreaking game because, in my opinion, they played a phenomenal game. I mean, literally, think about it. They led for 87.5% of the game, which, by the way, is true. I calculated it.
Fact-checked.
Think I did it right. But 52% three-point percentage. John Buggs was playing insane.
Right.
I mean, just, you had it, and you let it slip away. And it felt a lot like the UAB game earlier this year.
Yeah.
Where we let it slip away, and I'm sorry, that's stuff that comes back to bite you in the future. And I was not happy about it.
Yeah, Ben, what were your thoughts on the Mean Green performance?
Yeah, I mean, offensively, I thought the Mean Green did a great job of getting on the ball. They were not afraid to share the spotlight and ultimately played a very strong game. However, I do think that they got a little bit tired in the end. They maybe didn't take it serious enough, and it ultimately led to the loss.
I wouldn't even call it seriousness. It just, all of a sudden, they started miscuing because
Right.
SMU got back ahead, and I think they lost the game right there. I'm telling you, whenever Zurich Phelps got the dunk off the turnover, the game ended right there.
Yeah.
That was the game because I think they lost all confidence. All win from the sales was gone. It's the comeback. They came back on, and they didn't know what to do.
Right, and Reuben Jones has been in and out of games in conference play for a couple of weeks now, being able to play and then restraining his hamstring, I believe, a couple of times. Do you think Reuben Jones being out is really hurting this team, especially considering we're losing in close games?
That's the thing, because again, we're losing close games, and think about it, what does Reuben Jones bring? He could bring those extra points to get us the win, and also it doesn't help the team because you have to change the game plan, what feels like every few games, because first you're game playing with Reuben, and then he's out, and then the consistency isn't there, and it feels like almost something new, if that makes sense.
Just like the team can't build up that chemistry, especially with players being in and out.
Yeah, because that's not going to help. I mean, legit, we've seen it in the past. Unless you have to have that 5.
Right.
You need to have that 5, and they don't. They have a guy that's going in and out, which isn't his fault, but that's going to hurt the team.
And Ben, what would you say the impact of Reuben Jones being out has been on the Mean Green?
I haven't seen too much of an impact, frankly. I think that there are other players on the team, such as Edwards and Scott and Bugs, who can make up for that. I think that if we restrict our success to whether or not Reuben Jones is on the team, we're doing ourselves a disservice. I think we've played very well without him, and we have potential.
Speaking of what the Mean Green did well, what would you say the Mean Green did well up against SMU?
I would say that offensively and scoring they did very well. They were also very good at getting the rebounds, but a problem that we seem to have is when the other team gets the ball, we can't seem to do anything about that. I mean, we have trouble getting those rebounds, and the turnovers, I think, is a big problem for us.
Adam?
Whenever it comes to the what we did well, again, a really effective three-point shooting, 52%.
Right.
We led for most of the game, like 34 minutes we were in the lead. I mean, quite frankly, hot take, I think we played the better game right up until the very end where we fell apart. I mean, again, we played a great game despite the loss. It's a heartbreaking loss to lose like that, especially after playing just so well the whole time.
Right. Do you think the rivalry got to them?
I don't know.
Especially, playing at SMU versus having that home crowd the first time they played SMU?
I think that does play a factor, especially because, hey, they had a former president in their stands. We didn't.
Right.
But in all seriousness,
money.
I think playing on the road does affect you, especially with the Phelps dunk. All right.
Right.
Because the SMU just got the lead. You need to go down and a goof, Zurich Phelps dunk, and that can take the wind out of your sails instantly because now the crowd's into it. And crowds play a huge factor, especially in college ball. I mean, look at the top 25 teams like Duke. Home field advantage is paramount.
Right, especially in college sports.
Especially in college. It's just different in college because they're more passionate, let's be honest, than professional leagues.
Right. Ben, I'm going to ask you, in this game, there was a lot of players who showed up. You've mentioned Phelps. We've talked about Bugs, even Edwards. Who would you say was the MVP of the game?
I might get a lot of baggage for this, but I think Aaron Scott deserves MVP. Excuse me. I think that he's a very versatile player. Just looking at his track record, Scott is the kind of player where it doesn't matter what position he's in on the court. He's gonna make the scores. He's gonna get the rebounds. Now maybe he's not getting 20 points or 17 points like some of the other players,
right.
But he is versatile. He can do more than just score. He
kind of filling his role.
Exactly.
Adam?
And for me, okay, so it just comes down to Edwards because let's be honest, he kept us in the game whenever we really didn't deserve to be in it after how we gave up the lead. But he kept us in, he tried, it just unfortunately didn't work. Aaron Scott, though, I think it's a very good choice. Very great rebound. He was playing beautifully. It's just, I know I've said it a lot, it's just we played so well up until the end.
Right.
Like, I don't know how many times I can say that. Like, as you can tell, I'm very annoyed about it.
Well, I would hope so. You are a Mean Green fan. I would say my MVP is actually going to be on the SMU side. I'm going to go with Jaheim Hudson, the 6'7" forward. Not because he had some crazy performance, but if you look at the play-by-play in the last 5 minutes, he's mentioned, 10 or 15 times. He had 14 points, 4 rebounds, 2 assists off the bench.
He came unglued in the last 5 minutes. I mean, literally, he was the deciding factor. Like, I know that I was harping on Phelps, but that's just because he did something that looked cool. Hudson was what led to that. I mean, he played great, and I have to give him credit, even if he's an SMU guy, so I apologize.
Well, our men's team may not have beat SMU, but the Mean Green women's basketball team did get the win. They got the win 78-65, dominated in their performance. Who would y'all say the MVP of that game was? Because there was a lot of stars for the Mean Green.
Okay, so I got to go with Lampkin. I mean, oh my gosh, she was cold, and I mean, look at how she looked last year compared to this year. I mean, it's a different player entirely. Most rebounds, which by the way helped us a lot because SMU did not get any really second chance opportunities. They had 4 total offensive rebounds the whole game, and Lampkin is a huge part of that. So, quite frankly, she would be mine personally.
Yeah, Ben?
I would absolutely say Deani Robinson. I mean, easily. A whopping 22 points, 15 of which were scored in the first half. I mean, she really set the tone for the rest of the game, I think, in terms of points. And I think she's certainly a force to be reckoned with.
Right, I also went with Deani Robinson. 22 points, 6 assists, 3 rebounds, and also just efficient from beyond the arc, which in women's basketball, that can be the difference between winning a game, losing a game, and keeping that momentum. And speaking of momentum, Adam, what would you say the Mean Green did well?
What would I say the Mean Green did well? Like you said, just very effective shooting all around. I mean, because let's be honest, it wasn't just Robinson, it was the whole team. The whole team looked incredibly effective. I believe it was 56% field goal percentage. That's great.
Right.
And that was nice to have because, quite frankly, we got ahead and we never really, in my opinion, we didn't really have to worry beyond that. Yeah. They played a dominant game from start to finish, and the shooting and rebounding is the reason.
Right. Ben, what would you say?
I would have to agree with Adam. I think, we've showed incredible resilience, gaining up to 10-0 leads on SMU. More importantly, not scoring, but how they handled the ball. I mean, if Diani or Desiree gets their palms on it, it's game over, essentially.
Right. I definitely thought the Mean Green came out in that first half, and it was a closer game than what the score would say. So I would say that the Mean Green didn't let, SMU taking the lead and then coming back get into their heads.
Right. It's hard to explain. It never felt like UNT was out of control no matter what happened.
Right.
Like, they felt in control the whole game, and to me, they never looked out of control no matter what happened because they didn't let things get to them. And I know we're talking about the women, but I think the men let things get to them.
Yeah.
Especially late game.
And that has the energy that our women are playing with, that has to do a lot with Jason Burton. I mean, he has been stellar this season. He's broken 2 school records, one being their best start in program history in a 10-game span, and then he's also broken the scoring record. How good has he been for the Mean Green in his first season?
Not only has he broke records, he broke a clipboard once. But I'm just saying, in all seriousness, he brings a passion to the team that I've seen. I mean, watch last year's film compared to this year. It is night and day. I mean, quite frankly, I'll always harp on a Commerce guy. Love that university. But in all seriousness, he has done so well for this team. They play with different energy. You know what I mean? They feel different.
Right.
Lampkin, in particular, like I brought up earlier, a whole different player under Burton.
Yeah, Coach Burton may be making history here at UNT, but don't go anywhere because when we come back, we'll be talking about Black history through sports.
Live from UNT, it's Wheel of Culture.
Welcome back to Wheel of Culture. Our contestant is so close to solving this puzzle. But first, it's time to give the wheel a spin. Wow, you landed on London, one of the many places where you and your fellow students can go on a chance to experience new culture. But only if you can solve this puzzle.
I'd like to solve the puzzle. Study abroad.
That's correct. You just won yourself a trip to study abroad in London, England, and you can too. Just go to studyabroad.unt.edu to see deadlines and apply for scholarships. Get ready to study abroad.
So a man's been walking in the desert for days at a time. He finally comes across a bar and orders a Coke.
That's not funny.
Eh?
Oh, hey, didn't see you there. Let's get started. This is a motor vehicle. This is the blinker mechanism. To use it, push it up for the right blinker, and down to go left. You're welcome. It was easy.
Good evening, welcome back to SportsZone. As we all know, it is February, which means it is Black History Month. Here to talk about some athletes who have paved the way for African Americans is going to be Gabby Pippins and Kinsey Neely. Guys, I want you to go ahead and get into it. Kinsey, I'll start with you. Who is your first athlete that has paved the way?
My first athlete, of course, is going to be Serena Williams. I mean, she's
Queen.
one of the best tennis players that have ever played the game. She is the GOAT. That's what people call her. And for a true reason, she has 23 Grand Slam championships. And she started whenever she was 14 years old. Like, I mean, I ran track whenever I was 14 years old, but I wasn't doing those kind of numbers. Like, that's insane.
Gabby, what about you? Yours?
So my first one's going to be Gabby Douglas. And no, it's not because we have the same name. It's because she is just one of the most accomplished gymnasts ever. I mean, I love her so much. She's the first American to win gold medals in team and individual sports, and then also the first African American to win all around. And then on top of that, first Black female to do all of the stuff I just mentioned. So it's like stacked accomplishments all the way through. And I mean, I just feel like she's done so much for the Black community. She's really just given people that inspiration, you know, other young Black girls seeing her on TV and saying, wow, she can do it, I can do it too. Like, the amount of people who started doing gymnastics after her is just astonishing. So I love her.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Carolyn Peck. She was the first Black woman to coach an NCAA championship team in basketball at Purdue in 1999. And just to like put this in perspective of what the conditions were like at Purdue before she went there, this team was struggling. I believe she was at the University of Tennessee at the time under Pat Summitt, and she sort of told Pat Summitt, like, I don't know if I'm ready to be a head coach, because at the time I believe she was just an assistant, and then she goes and wins the national championship. And I just think she's paved the way for coaches and players like, you know, Dawn Staley, Candace Parker. Her stepping into that coaching position has opened up so many doors.
Yeah, you're not lying.
And Kinsey, your next one?
My next one? Okay, so like I said earlier, I'm a big track girl. I've been running track ever since I was 6 years old. And so like I really enjoy track. So I want to make sure I put my track athletes up to the standard that they deserve. Flo Jo, my queen. I looked up to her ever since I was the smallest, like the smallest child ever. So she has 3 gold medals in the 1988 Olympics, and she was the first Black woman to ever do so. She was the first Black woman to ever get 4 medals in general. She had 3 gold and 1 silver, like ever in the Olympics. Like, and it just makes me proud. I'm very proud of her for doing that. But besides that, she also set 2 gold, like she took 2 world records, and it took like at least 10 years, if I'm not mistaken, for those to be broken again. And she also, besides that, she was able to run out there with her hair all the way down, flowing in the wind. She had 4-inch nails on, 4-inch nails, and she was running, and she had a leopard print bedazzled suit on, and she did it herself. She put the jewels on there herself, and it was beautiful. Like that's what Black epitome is. That's what you want to see, and that inspires so many girls like Sha'Carri Richardson, who we see doing amazing this year. She's inspired by Flo Jo, and that's what I like to see.
Talk about a boss right there.
Yes, ma'am.
I didn't know all those details about her. That's pretty cool to learn about her, that she just kind of was slaying.
Yeah.
Before we invented the term slay.
She was the first to ever do so. Everyone said whenever you run track, you have to make sure you put your hair up because you're more aerodynamic. And she said, you know what?
Just hair flipped.
I'm not going to do any of that. And so she had her hair down the whole time, and she still won every single game, every single track, and she was doing amazing.
Wow.
Gabby, who's your next person?
So my next person, I had to talk about some basketball here. And don't get me wrong, guys, I am a huge Mavs fan, but I also love the Celtics. So we're going to be talking about Bill Russell. Oh my goodness. So he is by far the greatest winner and most accomplished person in sports history. He has 11 championships, 9 of them playing as a center for the Celtics, 2 as a coach. So not only was he one of the first Black NBA superstars ever, and during a time whenever integration was really just starting to happen around the 50s and 60s. But he also came back, coached that same team, and became the first black coach. And then, of course, the first black coach to win a championship, obviously. And then just his player stats they're just stacked, like 5 MVPs, 12 All-Star, 3 NBA first team, and then you also have 4 rebound championships. And that's just huge. I mean, he averaged around 23 points a game. So he just really did a lot. Like he was one of those
He was a big
crucial,
deal.
Yeah, he was one of those really big people to just start to have more integration into professional sports, not just basketball, but all of them. So
like a lot of the ones that we look up to now, they looked up to Bill Russell. So.
Absolutely, yeah.
Michael Jordan, LeBron James.
Absolutely.
I mean, they probably all looked up to Bill Russell. They probably had goals to beat Bill Russell's, accomplishments.
Exactly.
So him paving the way for, the athletes that we debate, who's the GOAT. That's pretty cool. My next athlete is Frederick Fritz Pollard. This dates back to the 1920s. He played in the NFL from the 1920s to 1926. And after his first year, he led the Akron Pros to their first ever NFL championship. And, just looking at the league now, I was looking at, different studies to try to figure out what the percentage is now in the NFL for the black community. And it's over 50%.
Yeah.
And so, going back to the 1920s, and you've got the civil rights movement in the 1960s, to see how far we've come, because of guys like Frederick Pollard is pretty cool.
Right. Yes. Yeah, that's a great point. I've never really thought about it like that, but I really do like that.
And the coolest thing too was I saw that 56% of the league is African Americans, but 69% of the league is people of color.
Yeah.
So,
which is
great.
He
may have paved the way for other minorities too.
A lot of people,
Asians,
like making sure that you're able to get that broadcast out to the world, and people are able to see that you can do a lot with just doesn't matter what skin color you are, you can do whatever you want to. Yeah.
Right. And Kinsey, your next person?
My next person, okay, once again, I'm going to go back onto the track route because...
There's a lot. There's a lot. I was looking too, and it was track after track.
And field. I love track and field so much, and it has the biggest part in my heart. So I want to make sure that I'm reaching out to Michael Johnson. I'm not saying Michael Jordan, Michael Johnson. I wanted to make sure it's very clear. Michael Johnson, he is an amazing track athlete. He did amazing whenever it was in the 80s. He started off in the 1996, and he was able to defend his record for 10 straight years in the 200 meter and 400 meter. It was not broken until Usain Bolt came into the field, and that was 12 years later. So it was really like watching him whenever I was younger, I was just like, oh my gosh, this is him. And not only that, but he has many sports camps all around us, and I went to all of them whenever I was a track athlete, and he personally went to those camps, and he would coach us, and he would teach us all these things. And it was just he was truly an amazing coach and athlete and everything. He wants to make sure that anyone that you're coaching, anyone that he's coaching, and he wants to make sure that's going on to the next league in track and field, he wants to make sure that they're going to be able to get there. They're going to be able to be as good as he was.
Right.
And it's something I can't help but respect, because now a lot of athletes, whenever they retire, they don't really stay up with the field, but he does, and I really do enjoy that.
And Gabby, your next person?
So mine's going to be a name that you may not have heard before. We're going to be talking about Leah Neal. She was a swimmer in the Olympics, specifically for Team USA. She was not the first African-American woman to swim in the Olympics, but specifically the first to swim in the finals and bring her team to a bronze medal in the 4x100 freestyle swim. She also brought that same team back in 2016, and they not only did that, but they also got silver as well. So she's really accomplished. She's also right now doing a lot with her own organization, Swimmers for Change. And she just kind of helps stop the stigma around what we've been talking about with certain races not being able to play certain sports or supposedly sticking to certain sports. She breaks that, and she's partnered with about 30 or 40 other Olympic players and Paralympic players, just kind of going around showing support for swimming in the African American community, going out to schools, teaching people there, like young children. And so I just really love how she's continuing to give back, even though she's not in the Olympics anymore. She's still living through this like organization that she's made. And so I also feel like a lot of people don't really know about her, and people really should. Like, she's great. So
especially bringing, attention to a sport that I would say isn't really, dominated by the Black community. Seeing someone, I can't fully relate, but I can, put myself in those shoes.
Right.
I knew if someone, looked like me and was interested in swimming, I would want to do it too.
Yeah, that's exactly what a lot of the athletes that we're talking about today have done.
Yeah.
They've really just paved the way, became the first, or if they're not the first, became like the most accomplished.
Right.
And really just set the bar that high to show
Yeah.
that we can do all this stuff too.
Like, we can make sure that we're able to put it in like our perspective as well, like Serena Williams.
Yes.
Right. All these athletes definitely have paved the way in sports. And when we come back, we're going to be talking about how 3 networks are paving the way we watch sports.
Look up here. 1, 2, 3.
Mom, Dad, I got it.
You're right, Mom. I have.
Good evening, welcome back to SportsZone. I'm your host, Mackenzie Freeman, joined here with Nash Lowry and Steven Lucero as we talk about this ESPN, Fox, and Warner Bros. Merger. Steven, I'm going to start with you. What are your general thoughts on this merge?
So this is big, right? I mean, I think we're in this era of streaming now. You know, we've kind of moved past cable, I guess, but there's all these streaming services. There's so many of them, and now here's another one. This is kind of a 3-in-1. So I think the exciting part is 3 big companies coming together so we can get more than just one thing, in one platform.
Right.
So I think it's nice that it's opening it up a little bit more.
Right. Nash, your thoughts on the merge?
I mean, really nobody can be dissatisfied with this. Like, thinking in my brain, why would I not want just one big hullapalooza of like all the channels that I would want, really? It is missing a few key ones that we could get into later. But really just the idea of everything in one spot, like really there's just no bad part about this.
Right. And one thing I wanted to ask you guys before we, get into the nitty-gritty of the details of this merge, what streaming service do y'all use, and what are your thoughts on that app or streaming service? Nash?
So I mean, really, it's not down to one, of course. It's really the entire process and idea of using different streaming services. I would say my main number one would be Disney Plus, simply because it has a lot of the shows that I like to watch as well. And for sports specifically, it's Paramount Plus, because they've had all the football games that have been on for the past month or so going into the playoffs. So Paramount Plus, I'd have to say, is my big streaming service.
Steven?
Yeah, I'd agree. I think, it's a little bit complicated because there's, say YouTube TV, Sling, those type of things that are, similar to cable, but they don't have so much. They have some of the sports things you want, but
doesn't quite have it all. There's some that's missing. And I think you can say the same thing about entertainment. There's Netflix, there's Disney Plus, there's Paramount Plus. I can go on.
Right.
It's like, this has these things, this has these things. How much are you willing to buy, to get everything you want?
Right. I'm kind of glad you mentioned like the Netflix and the Hulu, those streaming services, because I feel like this merge isn't just going to do a lot of things for sports. I feel like it's going to do a lot of things when it comes to just general streaming service packages. Maybe we see one of Hulu, Disney, and Paramount Plus.
Because you can partner this one with Disney, Hulu, and Max potentially. Of course, this
right,
plan,
exactly.
It's in its infancy, but that's a good point. And it's not like all of these channels that are going to be on this service are only showing sports. Like,
right.
Yes, it's big sports.
Disney
but they're showing
Plus.
other
That
things, right.
if you're a Star Wars fan, if you're a Marvel fan, it's all going to be right there. And I would say that this merger is probably going to be where the end of cable comes.
Yeah,
Would y'all agree?
Yeah, and I think that's big because I think we've seen sort of like a preview of this. If you look at, say, the Disney bundle,
right?
ESPN Plus, Hulu in there, so you get those options for entertainment and sports. And now adding Warner Bros. Into the mix as well as Fox, those are two other huge markets. So I think just combining it, getting it all in under one roof, that's really big for sports and entertainment together.
Right, and this merger is going to include a lot of channels. I know there's some ABC on there, there's FS1, FS2, and then obviously, a whole lot of ESPN on there. So what channel are y'all most excited to have access to in this one app?
100% TNT. Being able to watch the highest quality basketball,
right,
and hockey especially too. That is really going to be the heavy hitter with this one, as well as Fox. Like, it's not going on right now, but you think of Fox, they cover a lot of NFL games in this past season, but then also baseball that's coming up with it. Fox,
even college football, they had those, I believe they were the ones that did the big noon kickoff.
So Fox, but TNT, I feel like is the real heavy hitter. That's where they're going to really cash home with this one. The fact that TNT, is finally a part of a big powerhouse.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Steven?
Yeah, I think like you said, this is huge, specifically for basketball fans and for hockey fans.
Yeah.
Because you have it all. You have ESPN, and then you have Warner Bros., which is TNT and TBS. You get all those nationally televised games. I think that's huge, on a national market. My one concern is I think the overarching thing of the local network, the local.
Right.
I want to watch the Rangers. I want to watch the Mavs local games that aren't on national TV.
Right.
And I think that's when you look at the conversation of Bally Sports and these other networks that have the local rights. And I think that's the only thing that makes this complicated is because we get national TV, local, it's still a little bit tough.
See, my problem, and now we're talking local, so I am going to talk about Bally here because I'm not the biggest fan of Bally. I feel like,
I don't think anyone is.
I'm not going to pay $20 to watch two teams play, and sometimes they're not even on Bally.
Exactly.
And that's where my concerns are, is I'm paying a lot of money for a streaming service that doesn't always meet my wants and needs, with those blackout games that they have and stuff like that.
I mean, one thing I want to talk about earlier that you said it would probably be the death of cable. And how many times did we say that during COVID? Whenever everybody was really getting big into, I'd say like the first wave of streaming, I'd say this is the second wave. But what this is going to do is it's going to put people in control. Nowadays, whenever I'm watching something, like for say, I was watching the Super Bowl on Paramount Plus. And after it was done, did I stay on Paramount Plus? No, I went and watched something else on Netflix. So now what it's going to do is it's going to bring cable back in a sense. People are going to remember that they used to have these remotes that had a big fat guide button in the middle. So then if they were getting bored of whatever they were watching, they press the guide button and they flip through the channels.
Right.
And this does the same thing. If I'm bored of whatever game I'm watching, I can stay in the same thing and reinvent the guide button.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's key, especially when we're talking about price, because it's like, I'm not sure exactly how much this is going to be. They haven't really said yet, but it's a thing of like, they add up. You know,
Right.
I think it's easy when it's like, okay, $12, $15,
Right.
$10. I'll sign up on those. But this one, it's probably going to be a little bit more, you know, and I think it's going to be sort of maybe an eye shock.
Right.
It's like, wait, that's a bigger number. But the thing is, we're paying that already. It's just-
Right. Well,
in addition.
I've heard rumors and done a little bit of research on different websites and stuff like that, and I'm seeing anywhere between $40 and $60. And for the not streaming services, but the channels that you'll have access through to that, you know, with Bally, you're paying $10 for each sport you want to watch, essentially. So yeah, I'm gonna be willing to pay, you know, $40 to $60 for not necessarily an all-inclusive, but a whole wide range of teams I couldn't get to watch before this app will come out.
$60 is definitely the cap I would put on this.
Yeah,
if it's
same
really
here.
anything above 60, it makes sense because like how much is Disney and Netflix?
Right.
Probably like 12. So if you multiply that by 5, it adds up to exactly 60.
Right.
So really, I feel like it's going to be a bit of a change, and the price is going to be amazing for what they're offering. But is everybody really going to be using this to the max that they can?
Right.
Are they going to be watching this baseball game for exactly the 5.5 hours that it's on, and then jumping to the basketball game, and then jumping to
Right.
the hockey game that it's late at night? Or are they going to tune in for 30 minutes of the baseball game and then be done with it?
Right.
That's really where my heart's at, Stephen.
Yeah, and it's an interesting conversation because like there's so many options here, but you know we go back to the same point of it's still another one, you know,
Right.
and whether things are pulled from other channels, I think that's something that could possibly be a concern depending on how the rights all work out. But yeah, it's just how much are we willing to spend, and especially me as a college student,
Right.
$60, you know, it sounds fairly affordable for what you get, but at the same time, $60 a month, that's a lot for me.
Right. So I have a follow-up question to that. Do you know how Netflix has the like, if you're not in this household, you can't watch it type of thing? Do you think this app is going to have that?
You want to go?
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised just because I think we're kind of in this era of, you know, password sharing and,
Right.
you know, as we see this crackdown, you're launching a brand new thing. You don't want these kind of issues out of the gate. So yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if there's that sort of
Right.
feature.
I mean, this deal is in its infancy. Really, the most impressive part to me is the fact that all 3 of the heavy hitters in this one have agreed to split the revenue 1/3, 1/3, 1/3,
Right.
just like a pie chart evenly. So I would not be surprised at all if this is like a huge crackdown on the no password sharing. And that's
Right.
really not even my biggest concern. This deal doesn't have NBC or CBS, is that what
Right.
it is?
We talked
So
Yeah.
this one, in the past month with the football playoffs, I would have missed the Browns-Texans game, the Rams-Lions game, the Bucks-Lions game, the Chiefs-Bills games, Chiefs-Ravens, and the Super Bowl. I wouldn't have been able to see the Chiefs in the past 2 months
Right.
if I had just this deal.
Right. And so that brings me to another point is, yes, this merge isn't going to have access to some of the games you just mentioned. But one thing I'm kind of excited for is every event now that I want to watch doesn't have to turn into an event. Like I'm not going to have to go to my friend's house to watch the college football playoff game. I can just pull it up on my phone, be able to watch it wherever I want to. If it's in bed, I can watch it in bed. If I do want to make an event out of it, I can. But right now, I feel like as a person that watches sports, I don't really have that option.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's fair too, because you know you're in this situation where you know you want to have access to all these things, and especially like you said, you know whether it's I'm going to go somewhere to watch it, and you know it's just kind of tough, and it's just I hope that it's a success, but you know we'll definitely have to see how much we get and if it's going to be worth it in the end.
Right, we'll just have to see how this streaming service ends up, especially when it comes to price. But thank you guys for tuning in to SportsZone tonight. If you want some more behind-the-scenes content, be sure to follow us on our socials at NTTV_sports and keep those TVs on because nightly